Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by and welcome to part 2 of the look at the Oncidium Alliance. He says, pointing the camera at Evander. Okay, let's get going with part 2. Well, these are my two Sharry babies. I wouldn't say they are excellent plants, but compared with how they used to be, they're not doing bad now. I struggled with these for a long time. A single plant that ended up going down, being split up, repotted, not doing very well, growing on a little bit, not blooming, and then eventually they've sort of arrived at this particular state. Now, both of these have bloomed, so they are getting back to some sort of strength. This one's got a lovely strong new growth coming out here. It's got an old part to the plant. I keep my eye, whenever I see a pseudo bulb turning that colour, I keep my eye on it and make sure it stays firm. But I'm at the point now where that bulb is becoming a bit dubious, and as it's got that one next to it, I think I'll just cut those off in a minute. Better to be safe than sorry. Nonetheless, one good new growth here, and this growth round here is maturing. That hasn't actually bloomed yet, so it could do. It may well be the next spike to come as a Sharry baby. This one is a younger portion of the plant. And as such wasn't that bad. It's grown quite a lot of roots, and there's no new growths as such on this one at the moment, but the last new growth is actually maturing. It's not full size, so it wasn't strong at the point it was produced, but this should be pushing out some new growths soon. It's got active roots and not a bad old root system down in the pot, so yeah. I've always found that Sharry babies are a bit prone to spotting. That expression should stop being used. There is no such thing as a plant that's prone to spotting. It is some sort of bacterial or fungal infection, and it just basically gets into the pores of the leaves and forms the spots. So it can be stopped. A systemic fungicide applied on a, I won't say frequent basis, but on some sort of regular precautionary basis will keep these leaves clean. So it's not that they are prone to spotting, but it is an infection. It's not natural, so it can be stopped. But it would need some sort of regular, fungicide, systemic, applied, so that the infection doesn't get a hold. But that's really what it is. It's just an infected leaf pore that then goes black, and it makes them a little unsightly, shall we say. But it takes a while. Some leaves stay clean. That's a really old leaf. There's no spotting on that. That's an old bulb. That's an old bulb. This is a relatively new bulb. Yeah, so, it is possible to keep the leaves clean, but, it will take some work. It doesn't do them any harm as such, I don't believe. A leaf that's got that many spots, that's a little bit over the top. That still photosynthesizes. I'd still class it as a leaf that works, but nonetheless, it's unsightly. So, as I say, if you've got Oncidium types with the spots on the leaves, it is a form of infection, and it can be stopped. And obviously, if you treat plants that have already got spots on the leaves, the spots aren't going to go away. And I don't believe that spotting actually spreads as such. But if you think about it, if it's a fungal or bacterial type infection that's on the leaf, and you spray your leaves with water and get them wet, you're going to reactivate that and spread it to other pores on the leaves. Yeah? So it may be better to go for the prevention rather than the cure, if you see what I mean. But, yep, that's my two Sharry babies. Probably looking better this year than they ever have done, so you'll have to use your imagination to imagine what they were once like if that's supposed to be looking better. Still, they're growing. Okay, we're now getting to the point where they're just getting filmed as they come off the shelf. They're not necessarily in any sets now. These are more oddities, if you see what I mean, rather than a collective. They are in various stages. This one is an Aliceara, or Aliceara, however you want to say it, and it's evening colours, the Gloaming. This has struggled for many years. It did produce 2 new growths that weren't bad, and now those are producing new growths as well, and I can finally see some root activity. But it's in a state of recovery. I got a feeling I let that bloom on that growth a while back, which I probably shouldn't have done. But the front end of the plant, I mean, that was a weak new growth. It's now got another one, and this lead has also got a new growth. So sort of coming on, I suppose. This is what's left of my wildcat. This is one of the ones that got the bacterial rot, and I just about saved it, but it really was only just. And I was surprised it made it. But it is producing a new growth. It's an Oncostele officially, wildcat cheetah, or last time I looked, that's what it was called. I do have a new growth. It has hope. But again, that's a long way off blooming, and if that new growth produces a spike, I will cut it off. The plant needs to get back to some strength. What have we got over here? That was another oddity. Peggy, Ruth, Carpenter. What the front end name of this plant is keeps chopping and changing, so I've given up with it. I'm just going to call it Peggy, Ruth, Carpenter. It's probably got Odontoglossum in it because it's a fussy tyke. Last new growth was good. Back end of the plant started to rot. I caught it very early on, so I didn't lose too much of the back end of the plant. And it is now producing another new growth. Doesn't look very strong, but at least it's growing. And that one is yet to bloom, for me anyway. Went down at the point where it probably might have bloomed. This one seems to have a strange growth habit. It seems reluctant to push out more than 1 bulb at a time. It's no longer called this, but when I got it, it was Oncidium varicosum, variety rogersii, Baldin. But it's not called that now. And quite honestly, with a nice name like that, I don't care what it's now called. It's staying like that. But you can see the size of the bulb's potential. Yeah. Well, this still bloomed. This still bloomed, and they're getting smaller. And now I've got a new growth, so I don't know what that new growth's going to do. But it was repotted this year, so it can now remain undisturbed. There are some reasonable roots there, but I really want a new set of roots off of this growth now to keep that one going. But it seems to be getting smaller as time goes on, and that's not a good sign. It could be that there's some fusarium in that plant, and now would be a good time to get some fungicide in it as it produces its new growth. So we'll have a think about that one. This one, I'm relatively confident has got some fusarium in it. It's not a happy plant. It's a Hamiltonara, I think it's called. No, it's faded. Hamiltonara. It's just a no ID hybrid, but it does have beautiful blooms. And when it pushed up this new growth, I thought fine. But look at it. The leaves haven't extended. They've stopped short. Now, even though the bulb's swelling inside there, the leaves aren't right. And its latest new growth is not strong. So I got a feeling there's also a bulb that's totally desiccated and gone over there, and not a lot of root sign. That's got all the hallmarks of being infected. So I think the old fungicide needs to come out on some of these. Been getting a bit sloppy lately. So a bit of a motley crew there, but they all have signs of growth on them. But this one is a bit of a worry. And I've got a feeling it's 2 pieces in there as well. So you might need to, as far as fusarium is concerned, it can be stopped if you get it in time. If it's in the latest new growths, you'll be lucky to save it on the grounds that the roots produced from those new growths won't grow. They'll start to push out, and then the tips will just go brown or black, and they stop growing. So it doesn't recreate a root system, and without a root system, the new growth stops growing. And if it's treated in time, pardon me, those new growths should push out clean and get a healthy root system on them. As far as treatment is concerned, it needs to be a systemic fungicide, And if I treat a plant that I'm pretty confident has got it, I will make sure that one of the older bulbs gets cut off so I can check the rhizome. And if that purple ring's there, that confirms it. And then my treatment is to get all the old media off, get the sheaths off, get the plant as clean as I possibly can, and then I actually stand the root system in the systemic fungicide and leave it to soak overnight. That gets it into every bit of the plant where there's a root still working, because remember, it bungs up the path. So the pathway from the roots into the bulbs is blocked. But that's the best you can do. And then thoroughly spray the whole plant, every bit of it. Yeah. And then it needs a repeat treatment. It'll always take 2. You know, if the stuff worked properly, it should only take 1. But to be sure, it ought to be done twice. But my second treatment wouldn't involve a complete repot, but it would involve pouring the solution through the pot onto the roots in the new media. So that's what I do, and it's worked on many occasions, and on some occasions it fails miserably and the plant dies anyway. So you take your chances. A lot of the older books and some of the old school people will say if you've got a plant with fusarium, take it out in the yard and burn it, because it can't be cured. Well, I know it can if you get it right and get it in time. So you take your choices. Yeah, you take your choices. You can have a go at saving your plant, and sometimes it'll work. There is also a potential for it to spread to other plants. After all, it does spread by spores, which in theory can be waterborne and I suppose airborne. So it is potentially can spread from one plant to another. But I'm not sure I've ever seen that happen personally, and I do share water. If that was the case, knowing I've had fusarium in the past and it's been in plants before they were treated long enough for that water to have been used in other plants, if it did that on a regular basis, practically every plant in here would have it, and it hasn't. So I don't think it spreads that easily through sharing water, but there is potential. So if you can avoid sharing water, do it, you know. It's guilty of spreading stuff. You can even spread bugs around, you know, watering some scale off of one plant and promptly dumping them in the next plant. So, you know, don't share water unless you absolutely have to. Do, you know, really, you know, clean water for each pot if you can. Now this motley crew collectively come together on the grounds that at some point in their life they had the word odont on the front of their name. Well, the Odontoglossums were reclassified, so they're no longer called that. But this is naevium. This is quite a good plant, although I must say the latest new growths are not as good as the previous ones, but there are a lot of them. So this bloomed back in the year, bloomed well actually, had quite a few spikes on it, and the new growths are now pushing on. So it's a way off blooming again, but it's not a bad plant. It's not the easiest of things to grow, because it does like to stay cool, along with everything that's out at the moment. There are more, but these definitely. So coming round then, this is an unusual one. It's an Odontodia, and it's devossiana. It's a very, very old cross, done in the early 1900s, I think, and it's known as the dirty Odontoglossum because the older bulbs do go black, and they go through stages of starting off quite bright green, and then they get spotted, and then they eventually go completely black, but that's what it does. Luckily I found that out from the person I got it from, or I'd have actually been spraying that till it went out of fashion, thinking it was rotting, but it's not. It's in a poor state, basically, but it is an incredibly slow grower. It did bloom on its previous growth, and it does have a new growth, but it doesn't look like a strong new growth, but I'm giving that one time. This, unfortunately, is probably a lost cause. No tag on it, but it's effectively was Odontoglossum crispum. It's now Oncidium alexandrae, I believe. It does have a weak new growth, but this one got a bacterial rot and all the bulbs effectively disintegrated and melted, full of foul-smelling liquid. I think I may have just about saved it. I managed to rescue one old bulb, very dishevelled, and it is showing a new growth, but whether that's going to make it or not, quite honestly, I doubt it. And as such, it's years off blooming if it ever does again. Now, this one was once called an Odontoglossum, but it's now a Rossioglossum, or it was once. And look at the scale at the base of there. So I'm going to have to get at these plants. They're starting to get about again. This one just went downhill for no apparent reason and sat static for well over a year. Did nothing. No new growths, no new roots, no nothing. And it now has what looks like a relatively strong new growth. So it's pulling up, and it has got root activity going on. So it has got some support now, which it didn't have before. But the scale aren't going to do it any good, so I'll have to get at that one. I think the time has come. It's funny, you water your plants and you're often in a hurry and you can whiz past things and not notice them. And I've always said observation is the key to looking after your plants, and I've been getting sloppy lately. So picking these up and looking at them closer today, I do need to get a spray round again. That's where they hide, places like that. And you can see there's an odd one there. See, they're coming off really easy, so they may be dead, but I'd rather kill them twice and make sure. Now this one is, well, it's now Oncidium, Golden Rialto. And again, this one went downhill badly, but it has got a reasonable new growth on it. It hasn't got the best of root systems, but it has got some. And I was hoping to see a lot more new roots out of that new growth, but so far not. So it just may be one of those that pushes its new roots out late. So yeah, a bit of a motley crew that. But anything that's got Odontoglossum in it, or was once a pure Odontoglossum, because there were some species around, quite a few, they are cool growers. And they're not just cool growers, they're cool growers that are a bit on the more difficult side to grow. They are prone to root loss when repotting if the timing's not right. They do need good air movement, and they do need to stay cool. So obviously they haven't been in the best of environments in the past summer. But if they're going to pull on, they'll do it now, this time of year. And hopefully they can become strong enough that when we get into the warmer weather next year, you know, they'll have some roots and some growths that are maturing. So we'll see how we go those. Not my best plants by a long way. But it would be very easy to miss them out and not show them, but it wouldn't be fair. If you only show your good plants, it makes you out to be an excellent grower under all circumstances. Well, I'm not. There are some plants that don't do well for me, and I'd rather show them and perhaps put a bit of an explanation in as to why a plant isn't doing particularly well. Often it's just bad timing on the repot. I mean, I have had some bacterial rot this year. Now that is prone to being in very moist, still conditions when it's cold. But it seems like you can get it when it's hot as well, as I've had a few this year. Most were caught in time, but several weren't. Several just disintegrated within a few days. They just literally melt, they go soggy, and the liquid inside is foul smelling. And if it gets into the core of the plant, you've lost it basically. But a couple of these I am trying to get going again with the bits that were dry and, you know, seemed reasonably okay. So that's the what was once the Odontoglossum-y type things. Right, so these are my 4 Miltoniopsis, not to be confused with Miltonias. They're not even really that similar looking. They have a similar shape, but they've got totally different coloured leaves. They have like a grey-green colour to their leaves, and these are cool growers. A lot of the Oncidium Alliance are good intermediate growers, and some of them like to be at the warmer end, but these are cool growers, and these are fussy little tykes as well. There's several things that can go wrong with an orchid, like, you know, the media can turn a bit acidic and start going off. You do that to one of these, you lose your roots. Yeah. Keep these two warm, they won't be happy. Don't have good airflow, they won't be happy. Drop your humidity, they won't be happy. And you combine any two of those and you're liable to lose your plant. So these are a little fussy, but nonetheless very rewarding. And the goal with one of these, if ever you buy one, is get one with a good root system and get off to a good start. Check the media. If it looks wrong, smells a bit iffy, get it out of that and get it in something decent. These do not like any form of acidity. They like to be clean, pure water, and given the circumstances, they will grow quite well. Now these have had poor circumstances because of the heat wave, but nonetheless they've survived. Now they're coming into their happier period because I've got lower temperatures, so they're doing better. This is a no ID. It's got several new growths coming on it. It has got some roots. I wouldn't say it's a good root system, but there are some in there and there's signs of root activity. This is recovering from, I don't know what went wrong. Just one of those, it just started to go downhill, and I thought if I don't get that out of its media, get it in something fresh and take advantage of the new growths producing new roots, I'm going to lose it. So just about made it with that one. All the others do have names. This is Junette, and this opens a nice pale yellow but still an attractive colour. It was in bloom when I got it, promptly faded to white. It then bloomed again not that long ago, and the blooms stayed, they're yellow for most of the time. So it is a pale yellow Miltoniopsis, and they're not so easy to come by. Lovely strong new growth and some good root growth on that. And boy is that dry, that needs watering now. These also shouldn't dry out, I'll say that straight up front. This is Herr Alexander, and it's endearingly known as Donald. And if you look at the picture of the bloom and imagine the Donald Duck with the big eyes and the beak, you might be able to see the resemblance. But it was nicknamed by what was a very frequent visitor to my channel in the day. Nonetheless, this one was starting to lose its roots. I caught it in time. It's now producing some roots and some nice new growths. That should bloom again down the line. It blooms reliably. It doesn't look the healthiest of plants, but it's hanging in there. And this is probably the newest one. This was sent as a gift. And this has no ID as far as I know, and this one is a good yellow, I am reliably told. The new growth is producing a root system that are good. It did have some reasonable roots on it. That's a lovely strong new growth. There is no reason why that shouldn't bloom, but there's no sign of it doing it yet. So this appears to be a reasonably vigorous version of a Miltoniopsis, given that growth is certainly larger than what it had before. So that should bloom in the not too distant future. The bulb's just starting to show signs of swelling at the base, which is a sign of maturity. It's fully leaved, although it is still growing a new leaf in there, so it's still actively growing. That's not a bug. No, bit of moss. Oh goody. So this one's coming on nicely. I'm really looking forward to that one blooming. And I say that's the only one that hasn't bloomed out of these, and it's a relatively new plant. Well, this is one of my largest Oncidium types. It's actually a Bratonia Shelob Tolkien. Used to be called Miltacea, I think, but I think it's accepted that it's Bratonia now. This has grown well and bloomed well this year. I'm very pleased, and it's currently doing new growths. Many. Nice big strong one here, nice one here. There is more than that. There's another one tucked in behind the tag there, just starting. There's another new one in the middle of the plant. I think that's probably about it. So at the moment, 4 new growths. Regular bloomer, reliable bloomer. So that's at least 4 spikes to come down the line. But it's a long way off blooming now. I mean, these growths have got to do a lot of work to get up to mature size. They'll be doing that all through the winter, and with the extra help of the lights, hopefully. And they'll be into blooming again next year. So it's a bit of a wait, but well worth it. Good, fragrant blooms on this, absolutely gorgeous. So those are all my Oncidium Alliance plants. I've got a feeling I might have missed one or two, but I got most of them. You can see there's a lot of variety there, from strong vigorous plants. These are the only two actually in bloom at the moment, Pt2 and the Sotoanum. But all the twinkles will be following on behind, and the others have got to wait because they're either waiting for new growths or pushing on new growth, so there'll be a while before they come round, probably next year. And there's a hell of a variety there, from ones that may not make it, to ones that are trying to recover themselves, to those that grow well and strong, so it's a mixture. And quite honestly, I have more difficulty with the Oncidium Alliance, and I think it's just the variety that's in there. It's not only the variety of types within the alliance, but the variety of the environments. You've got the Miltoniopsis that quite honestly come from sort of montane forest areas where they've got very high humidity, a buoyant atmosphere, constantly moist, quite shaded and cool. That environment is difficult to recreate. Well, certainly in here it is anyway. It's a glass house with sunshine on it. So, and then you get those that are quite heat tolerant and like really good light, and all the variety in between. A lot of them don't like root disturbance. Get the timing right and minimise that. It keeps them going better. But there is such a variety, and the difficulty is finding out which environment is best for which plant. And sometimes it just has to be trial and error. There's no other way of doing it, especially with the hybrids and the intergeneric hybrids, because the information's not there. So it's almost guesswork. But all I can say is that if you're going to go for Oncidium types, get a good one that's got a good root system and is a healthy looking plant. So you're starting with a good plant, and then try and keep it that way. Don't let it go downhill. Don't let the media go off. Don't lose your root system. Keep them strong and healthy, and they should do well for you. And a lot of these will grow quite well in the home, even though the humidity is probably lower than they would like. Quite a few will put up with that. Some won't. They just won't do well in a home environment, and it's probably trial and error. But I enjoy the Oncidium Alliance. A lot of them have got very interesting blooms. A lot of them are fragrant, and if they're growing well, they're a joy to have. But I do struggle with them, as you've seen. They're not all good, strong, healthy plants. But those are they. That's what I've got. I've always got my eye out for a new Oncidium type that's a good, strong plant that's got interesting blooms, preferably fragrant. So that list is endless. It isn't a wish list. It's just a random list that suddenly sparks my interest when I see a plant that comes into that category. So I'm certainly not ruling out getting any more. That will never be ruled out. I haven't seen all the Oncidiums yet, but at a show you see one, you think, oh, that's a smashing plant, I really like those blooms, and you get your nose in there and you think, oh, that's fragrant as well. What's that one called? You make a mental note and then spend years looking for it and never find it. But anyway, those are these. I hope you've enjoyed it. There's been a bit of care along the way. But just basically a look over the Oncidium Alliance that I've currently got. There have been some losses over the years, some of which I would like to replace one day, but there are some that no matter how hard I've tried and how many plants I've tried, they don't grow well for me, so that they just get crossed off the list. I'm not prepared to buy a plant that I know I'm going to struggle with. I usually find that out later. Anyway, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.